Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar. You're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression, because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash.
Yeah. Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you. That was...
Yeah. We got a little metal going on here. We got Magoo in the house, Tyler in the house. This is Libertarian Podcast Review. I don't know. I think it's 87th episodes. We're getting close to 100. We are going to talk about the trial of the century. Magoo, welcome. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Tyler. Thank you, as always, for having me on.
Yeah, we had you on recently on the Kill podcast stuff, and I said, we're going to come back. I think you still need to come back to talk about other stuff, but we're going to, I was watching this trial, and I saw a super chat from you, and I'm like, hey, another completely whacked out person here. So first of all, how are you doing? Life going good? Is staying warm down there in Georgia?
Yeah, no, life is good. Been doing a little bit of traveling over the past month, which has lended a lot of time to pay attention to this trial. Because I'll be honest, most normal people should not spend 12 hours a day consuming this amount of lengthy garbage. But no, life is good. Just got back from visiting with the family up in the cold white north. Did some ice fishing back here in Georgia, where it's full blown springtime. And yeah, everything's good. How about you?
Well, I'm in Northern California, out in Sacramento, by Sacramento, and we had some slushy snow down on 400-foot elevation here. So it's cold all of a sudden. I'm not a fan of this. I want to move out, but this is rough. Yeah, you're right. I haven't spent 12 hours a day watching this stuff, but depends on how my workload is. I'm one of these people that I am always watching, or something's always on when I'm working. And so this has just been what I've got going on. My wife's like, attorney, watching attorneys work while you work. What? I'm like, yep. So why are you interested in this particular one? Is it because it's a Southern boy?
So yeah, that's part of it. Another part is the work that I do. I work by myself 99% of the time. Okay. Whether I'm driving to potential job sites or working here at the house. And so, I mean, I got to have something in the background going. So typically it's podcasts, but with the recent, I guess, popularity of attorneys live streaming trials and giving their real-time breakdowns, Nick Rekieta is probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
I watched the Chauvin trial and Rittenhouse and, fill in the blank here and there over the last few years, that when this one came up, finally they hit something, really close to home, because I've got family down in the Savannah area.
Oh, I thought you were going to say because you've murdered some people. Okay.
Maybe. No, but I've got family in the Savannah area. I went to college down near that area. In fact, when I was traveling for work, I was down in Hilton Head, which I could have driven to. I might have been able to even get in the trial because nobody was going in the beginning. But I'm very familiar with the Low Country, Southern Georgia, Southern South Carolina, prominent Southern attorneys. I've had to hire a few when I went to college down there. So it felt familiar to me. And with this story, with how many parts there are, which if anybody has watched the HBO documentary or Netflix doc that just dropped this last week, you can see that this is tailor-made for everybody to have some interest level and some aspect of it. I just happen to I come from a law enforcement family, so I like to look at more the defense case to see how good or bad the evidence collecting actually was.
Yeah.
And so my position is a little different than others. I don't give a shit if he did it. I want to look at what can they prove.
Yeah, most people shouldn't do podcasts. Yeah, here we are. That's exactly it.
True statement.
Sput said it's 15 in Idaho. Yeah, my parents live up in close to actually where she does. My son's in Portland, and they got a ton of snow as well. So, so look, you're on there with me. Now I was thinking about this. I was like, oh, this new trend. Now the new trend is watching attorneys watch it live, right? Because then I'm like, oh, wait a second. I watched the O.J. Simpson trial like it was. I mean, that was the thing to do. My dad and I, we watched that intensely. So I spent a lot of time, and that was kind of similar. And some people got famous from that. There's CNN stuff of the attorneys, and now they weren't having it live there. Pop out and do their whole thing, which is what Law and Crime is. The website or whatever YouTube is doing. But yeah, I watched, I first found Nick when people were talking about the Rittenhouse trial. So I joined that halfway through, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Saw Del Brooks. There was another one I watched some of, and then obviously this one. Why don't you tell us, give us a breakdown. And by the way, my wife's really big into crime podcasts. So when I mentioned this thing, she already had kind of known about it, but not to the extent that I'm now watching it, right? First of all, did you watch the two documentaries that Netflix just came out with? How were they?
They were identical. The only difference is maybe Netflix spent a little more money getting actors to kind of act out the scenes where you just see their feet or fuzzy silhouette of a person out of focus doing something. But it was identical. It was the same. It was 3 episodes on both platforms. One episode focused on the 2015 death of Steve Smith, and we can get into all this as we kind of go through why this is even a case. Then they did a whole episode on the boat wreck where Paul, the son of the accused murderer in this trial, was driving a boat, inebriated, wrecked into a pylon in South Carolina, and one of his friends flew out of that boat and subsequently died. Body wasn't located for like a week. And then the 3rd episode would then be about what this trial is about, or supposed to be about, and that is the brutal killings of both Paul and Magoo Murdaugh, the son and wife of a very prominent attorney, Alex Murdaugh, 4th-generation attorney in a little county, Hampton County in South Carolina. So both documentaries were basically identical. It was only necessary. Well, neither were necessary, I guess, but for entertainment purposes, only one was needed. If you've watched one, you don't need to watch the second. It's literally the same thing.
How are they? And by the way, a note here that said my volume was a little low, so I tried to spice it up a little bit. Let me know if that's better. How were they as far as you've been watching the trial? Is it good portrayal, or is it your typical, slow steps to some place where it looks seedy, kind of thing? And is it treat him in a good light? Because, by the way, we'll get into it. I just think the evidence is shit in this case. So
yeah. No, the documentaries did exactly what documentaries are intended to do, and that is to get the viewer to think like and agree with the producer director of said documentary.
Right.
And I think for any of the initiated that knows nothing about this case, that goes in and watches those blindly, they will come out thinking that the entire Murdaugh family is guilty of every crime that could be levied against them in the state of South Carolina. They are not painted in a good light, and for good reason. They're not good people.
Yeah.
And I think that the intention behind it is to kind of express a side of the outright privilege and cavalierness in which the family was able to kind of gallivant around town or around the region and kind of do as they pleased with very little to no repercussions. And right now in the current, ether that is America post 2020, the idea of white, rich, affluent, privileged individuals getting away with whatever they want, you couldn't be more guilty before you were ever tried.
Right. And by the way, that boat case is, I think, the prime example. It's like the rich family. The son does what he wants. He's getting drunk. He rapes some girl, and daddy covers it up. Right. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know how dad covers that up, but pays off someone. I mean, he has a bad, anyway, I think there's a lot of that. before we get too into deep on this, you made a point that I think is fascinating, which is you come from a like a law and order type of family. I grew up very conservative. You know, I didn't make mistakes. My family wasn't breaking the law. I really wasn't that way. And when I went into law school, I remember a professor saying, he goes, look, a lot of times you have, you know, you get a set of facts, and then you kind of have to argue one side, you kind of have to argue the other, and they really want you to push those things. He's like, you're going to kind of pigeonhole yourself. One side always seems to be the prosecutor, and one side always seems to see it from the defense side. And he goes, a lot of times it breaks down kind of like, are you liberal or conservative? And that's kind of your, and that's the way it was. You know, all these people were guilty. I mean, hey, Jose is committing a crime. You're right there. I've already decided he's guilty, right? Yeah. So what's interesting is then I start to go into practice, and I immediately figure out, you know, the judge is paid by the state, the DA is paid by the state, and a lot of these, the public defender is paid by the state. You are just not going to get yourself a good, you're going to get short shrifted here. So I started to think about things differently, which we should be doing. What are you doing when you're watching these? Sorry, the long intro there, but with your background of that, have you kind of switched over, or how are you seeing these things? Do you presume the cops, because I've had that before where, you know, sorry to digress a bit. The judge is in there, and every day he's got a bailiff, and that bailiff has a uniform on. And then someone comes to testify with a uniform on. That guy is always in the right. So anyway, how's your kind of your perception, just initial bias?
So, and I believe everyone's biased, you know, to a degree.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from a multitude of factors. Mine would be my upbringing. You know, my parents, mom, dad, stepdad, all in law enforcement to a degree, whether it's working at records in the local jail to a county patrolman to an FBI special agent. And I know, bring it on. Oh my God, Magoo's a Fed. No. When your parents are,
the obvious
one. Yeah, exactly. When your parents go into that line of work, you tend to kind of go the opposite way, complete 180. The only time that I will like inherently look at something where everybody is saying ACAB, and just say, no, you guys have it wrong, are clear video evidence of like an initiated stop where force was used, and everybody's looking for immediate ways that the cops are in the wrong. And I'm looking for all the ways that the assailant could have avoided the outcome, which I know is very not libertarian of me, but I don't care. I don't really give a shit anymore about libertarian titles, or you know, do I fit in this camp or that camp, or, you know, if I don't think this way, then I'll get ousted. I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
And I think
true libertarian that you don't
contrarian,
anybody.
Contrarian till the day I die.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from, you know, hearing stories of when my parents come home and the amount of shit they had to go through and the people that are lying to them, and you know, all that. So I hear sides of the story that most people don't, because cops can't speak publicly most of the times about this kind of stuff, especially before a verdict is given or while they're still employed. But growing up around it, you hear about things that the public just doesn't know. So that's really the only time that I'm kind of like, I want to see why everything happened. And when it comes to trials, it's reversed. I'm immediately like, fuck the state. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in order to take your rights away, or sometimes take your life away. I think that the burden should be extremely high for that to happen. I think in the moment on the side of the road, I think you're an idiot for fighting for justice in that realm. That's not how it's supposed to happen. So I kind of look at the idiots that think that they can win an argument legally on, you know, standing on the curb. I think, well, you're doing it wrong. That's to be done in court. And if you make it to court, then I will be much more interested in kind of fighting for your side then. But there is a process. You can disagree with it, but it's the one we got. And once anything gets to trial, I am now looking at it more from a defense perspective than I am prosecutor or DA or state's perspective, if that makes sense. I don't even know if that's supposed to make sense, but that's just how I operate.
No, that's good. A few things there. One, it's interesting that you say you grew up in like a law enforcement family, and then you divert. It's kind of like the preacher's son that's a bad person. I mean, you didn't want to go into law. Or Kirk C. Nix. I don't know if you know the Dixie Mafia guy. his dad was a judge, I believe, and so an attorney, quite prominent. And then this guy is just the bad seed doing all the criminal stuff. Okay, so that's good to see. I mean, I'm similar, and especially when I watch this, and I hope that if you watch the Rittenhouse trial as an example, you can see that similar to this, except that one was obvious that we knew he shot. There was no question there. But with all these cameras, the question was, was there intent to go out and murder? Was it defense? And you saw all the crazy things that the prosecutor was trying to do. And for me, I'm just like, this shows so many times how the DAs are just unscrupulous. They're horrible. I've had them say, "Oh, we'll go to trial because we don't care." And I'm like, but it shouldn't it be not having the bad guy or the good guy in jail, so to speak. So anyway, let's start off with this case.
Mm-hmm.
Well, exactly what you said. There's all kinds of underseating things. There's a boat case. That came out that I didn't know about a lot of the stuff, which is Alex himself was stealing millions of dollars, and I could go into kind of it blows me away. And one, if you've watched any of this, his law firm, I don't know how they come about this unscathed, because the rules for treating trust accounts, I mean, you are really held to high. I mean, I'm sure the South Carolina bar is the same way as California. So it's crazy that he was extorting millions of dollars and had this drug problem, and then his wife and everything. So first step back in here. Is there anything that came out with the prosecution that you thought was like a bombshell?
I think they've had a few moments where they've had some wins, and it's only been when they were actually engaged in discussing the evidence surrounding the murders. Anybody that's been watching this trial, it's been 5 weeks. They just finished their 5th week. This trial could have been wrapped up in 10 days, but they spent over half of the trial talking about all these other instances, mainly the financial crimes, that to me, I don't think there was any win to be found when they were in that neighborhood. I think that the only thing that they've been able to show that will bolster their case or potentially sway the jury to their side is exposing that Alex actually lied about his timeline as far as where he was when he initially said he was there. And the biggest one was he, up until the time of this trial, pretty much up until yesterday when he took the stand for the first time, had always said that he was back at the house napping for 45 minutes to an hour before the murders happened, allegedly, within that time window that we are expected to believe. But through evidence that I don't think Alex knew about, which is why his story was what it was, exposed that that was a lie, and that he was actually placed at the scene of the murders much closer in time, in proximity to when we are to believe that the murders happened than he initially said. Other than that, I don't know. They put a lot of evidence out there. They got his OnStar records that showed how fast he was going and where he was going, when he was going. But all the evidence that they've shown that they thought would come across as, evidence that would lead to a possible guilty verdict has only opened the door for more plausible, ways that this crime could have taken place, not putting Alex at the center of it. So for every one bombshell, they've had 10 other doors open that they themselves opened up by introducing evidence that isn't that great. So that's a long way to say just one that I can think of.
Right. And I don't even know if it was Bob. The radio show that I was listening to with my wife this morning, the guy's like, "Oh, I haven't watched it at all, but let me put my opinion on it." And they were playing a clip, and it was about all the stuff he had stolen. And my wife just goes, she hasn't been watching either. And she says, "It seems like there's a lot of people that would want him or his family dead." Yeah, exactly. Okay. So let's step back. Why don't you walk through, just start from the beginning. He's a prominent attorney. We got all that stuff. He's stealing millions of dollars from his own law firm. and clients. So he does like personal injury, right? And he gets paid, and sometimes they'll break off and they'll say, these are attorney's fees. Typically when we do it, it's just one lump sum that comes in, and then you're splitting those off and paying your client. But he was taking the full attorney's fees, sometimes not even paying them to the firm, getting them deposited them to himself. Then he was stealing some of the money that was for the clients, just diverting it out and then trying to pay it back. And so this kind of starts to come out. There's this boat case where, like you said, his son, someone who died, and the family was being sued for that. And then his wife and son get murdered. Okay. So why don't you walk as far as you want to do, telling the story there, weaving it up through the murder as best you know any details on that.
Okay. So the murders of Paul and Maggie happened the evening of June 7th, 2021 at the property of the Murdaughs in Moselle. And the name of this property, they just refer to it as Moselle. It's a 1,700 acre property that has a house and a number of sheds, an old hangar. There used to be an airstrip on the property. And that area where they have the hangars, they've converted some of the sheds into kennel spaces. And it was the evening after dinner time where Paul and Maggie go down to the kennels to tend to the dogs. There was an issue with one of the dogs that was staying at their residence that belonged to a good friend of the family. And so they wanted to go down and do whatever they do. And the story is that Alex, well, the story that we know now is that Alex was down there reluctantly to kind of go just take part in whatever the family was doing.
If you believe him.
Yeah. And allegedly he was there for, let's just say 15 to 20 minutes. And then Alex, as far as his story goes, left to go back to the house to get in his Suburban to then go visit his ailing mother who had, or I guess still has, I believe she's still alive, Alzheimer's. And so at like 9 p.m., he's going to leave to go visit her. While he's away, we are to believe that some unknown assailants show up and murder both Paul and Maggie. The way that I believe the story goes is that someone with a shotgun, a 12-gauge shotgun, shot Paul while he was in the feed room adjacent to the kennels, once in the chest, close enough to have stippling, and the shotgun wadding, which is part of the shell, lodged in his armpit. He was shot in the center chest, but from right to left. And so that was the first shot. Apparently that's not a fatal wound because it was, I guess it just didn't hit enough of the, main arteries or whatever. But then it's followed up with a headshot across the shoulder, goes in his left shoulder, kind of horizontal, and then cleaves off the entire back of his head, blows his brains up into the ceiling of the feed room. Skull matter, his entire brain was lodged out of his head and was resting by his feet. Again, this was with a 12-gauge shotgun, so you can imagine the amount of biomaterial that is strewn everywhere, including on the shooter, and we'll get to that. By
the way, let me just ask a question here, because I think I don't know if they ever really got to this, but shot first time from one side and then shot from the other side. So does his body spin? Is it two shooters? Where are the guns? Did they refine the guns?
The murder weapons have not been recovered.
Okay.
The only thing that they know as far as how to trace what weapon did what killing is just the caliber of guns that were used. And that's just from the evidence that is in the bodies. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I'm on Odyssey as well, so go there. I'm not monetized. First of all, let's be serious here. Get me monetized, and then we'll get demonetized. Anyway, keep going.
So that's Paul, and I believe that he's the first one to get killed. Maggie is found roughly 15 yards away with, I think, 5 wounds, potentially from 4 rounds of 300 Blackout, which is an AR-style rifle. She gets shot in the upper thigh and the wrist, which I believe is the same shot. Probably hit her wrist first, goes into her thigh, and exits her upper left thigh. And then she takes another shot in the abdomen that exits through her, I think, kidney. out her left side. So you're also, again, you're talking two different trajectory paths on the first two shots on Maggie. And then she folds over, probably in pain due to the gut shot. And then she gets shot in her left breast that travels up into her neck and then into her head. And that's a kill shot. She goes down to the ground. The shooter comes around over top of her and shoots down point blank range execution style from her head down into her body.
Let me ask you a question. How many shots of the shotgun?
Two
shots. Okay. And they recovered all the fragments and our little bullets, the BBs in there, or whatever that's in a shots in a shotgun shell. And how many so how many does that hold? Why are they going from a shotgun to a blackout? So
that is the biggest. When I first heard what weapons were used, that is when I initially said it was more than one shooter. And so even if Paul was one of the shooters, he wasn't the only one, which means that the investigation's not done and that the charges of him being charged with first-degree double murder, which means that he shot both of them, this should immediately, likely, go to a non-guilty verdict. And so as soon as I heard that two separate guns, because it is not typical for somebody to murder, for one person to murder two people using two separate weapons, especially when an AR-style rifle can hold 30 rounds and take out, as we've heard, how dangerous they are. They are more than capable of taking out more than one person or more than two people without even running out of half of your magazine. So that didn't make sense to me.
Did Alex have a blackout? What is it? The 301 blackout? Is that what they call it?
300 blackout.
300 blackout. Sorry.
Yeah. So your three main calibers in an AR style rifle are 223, 5.56, 300 blackout. Those are the three most common. Now they keep trying to say throughout this entire trial that 300 blackout is some rare, mystified level of ammunition. I have 300 blackouts here. Now I haven't killed anybody with them. But
they don't know what gun I was actually used in then.
They cannot prove which gun was actually fired. Now, let me go back and either fill in a blank or remind you that Moselle was purchased as a hunting property, 1,700 acres of hunting land. And they hunted everything from deer down to small game, doves and birds, hogs, namely. 300 blackouts are perfect for hog hunting. And so they had more than one 300 blackout on site. They had multiple 12 gauges, multiple rifles in every caliber imaginable. Their gun room was quite extensive, and I'm pretty fucking jealous. As a matter of fact, it was pretty fucking sweet.
Have they said any of his guns are missing?
Yes. So the 300 blackout, they initially, Alex bought both his sons. He has another son, Buster, who's still alive.
Right.
But he bought Buster.
Strong red hair.
Very, very. I think the stronger the red hair, the less of a soul you have.
I'm just going to say, why didn't convict him and let's be done?
Yeah, it was fucking Buster. But the father who's on trial, Alex, bought both his sons 300 blackouts for Christmas back in like 2016. That's also, I think, the same year that they bought the Moselle property. And so it's like, hey, Merry Christmas. And these are nice guns. Like I said, I have a couple 300 blackouts. They aren't nearly as nice as what these were. These were custom made with night vision scopes, and they were like roughly $10,000 a gun with everything that was kitted out on it.
Gotcha.
Paul's 300 blackout went missing at a Halloween party a few years before his murder, and there's differing stories on whether or not that gun was ever replaced. Some people say it was, some people believe it never was. It's hard to know, but the thing that came out through all of the testimony was kind of unquestionable that Paul was terrible at taking care of and knowing the whereabouts of his weapons. He would leave them places. He wouldn't clean them regularly.
Halloween. Yeah,
exactly. He would have it in his truck or leave it at a friend's house, or he was very careless. Again, it goes into the mindset of being a very rich, spoiled, privileged, kid with multiple guns, and you lose one, you just get another, whatever, you just move on. So that's one that is confirmed missing.
Do you know what the registration laws are for guns in South Carolina? Is it like, California is pretty strict. So, anything I have, if I'm going to have to report or should.
Yeah.
But
no, I imagine it's similar to Georgia where I live. And that is no, there's none. You don't have to register anything. The only time anything is, I guess, technically registered is if you're getting something that you have to get an NFA stamp for, like a suppressor or something like that. And that only gets registered by way of applying to be able to purchase it. Now, I imagine maybe if you go to a gun store and buy a gun, that automatically logs you into some level of registry, but that sounds like it goes against every aspect of 2A that would at least be prevalent in the southern states. So no, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing you have to do once you own said gun. You just own it.
Okay, so tracing it back, it's not that easy to do, but as you mentioned, so he kills the wife, execution style, and I'll let you proceed on that. I just kind of want to talk about the guns real quick here. So, but there's nothing really that, I mean, they would have to find debris on him, especially if he's handling 2 guns, right? Yeah. At this point, you're slinging one, you're dropping one, and then you've got to clean them. So was there traces of guns being cleaned? Did he have, these are problems that I know that they haven't really concluded. So there's some issues here. Was there any of that?
So the 2 biggest and most
Is that
obvious,
the TARP issue then that am I kind of leading towards?
So we'll get to that. But the two most obvious and first things that any investigator is going to look for when there's a murder at the hands of a firearm is test anybody who could potentially be traced to this scene for gunshot residue.
Yeah.
And all that is anytime a firearm is fired, the burning of the gunpowder and the expulsion of the gases will blow out the residue that is formed by, firing a weapon that ends up on your clothing. It ends up on your hands. And it also ends up on the weapon and subsequently any hard surface material, doorknobs, car steering wheels, whatever, you can test for the presence of gunshot residue. And all that proves is that a gun has been handled or fired by this person or in this area. And because Paul and Maggie were both murdered with firearms, it's pretty obvious that there should be gunshot residue on whoever did the shooting.
Right.
Now, that's
not hunting facility.
But that's the problem is that it's a hunting facility. They have a shooting range. There's thousands of expelled casings around the property. Alex even admitted that they did some shooting himself, Paul and Alex, earlier that day. So Paul would have gunshot residue on his hands. But just because he has gunshot residue in no way lines up or proves that Paul did the shooting.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing. Gunshot residue.
And did they test him? I know they tested him. What was the results of that?
He tested positive. And by he, Alex, the guy who's on trial, tested positive for gunshot residue, which immediately makes the true crime fans go crazy going, he did it. But here's the thing. When Alex arrives back home from visiting his ailing mother and discovers the bodies, he calls 911. He gets scared thinking that this is a hit or maybe he was the intended target or the level of danger is still there. He goes back to the gun room up at his house, which is 1,167 feet away, to retrieve a firearm so that he can protect himself from any potential future danger. And so just by handling that shotgun, he has gunshot residue on his hands. If you've handled a firearm that has been fired and not thoroughly cleaned, you transmit that gunshot residue to your person. So that is a plausible reason for why his testing positive occurred.
Is there any way to see like the extent to which, like, is there gradients of GSR? Like okay. No,
nope,
it's just there.
Nope.
Now, did they test his car? His, I don't know, some sort of GM?
So he has I think a Suburban. I don't believe they tested his car for fingerprints or gunshot residue, but they did test his car for blood. And that was the second thing that I was going to mention was, as an investigator, first step, gunshot residue, second step, and these could be interchangeable, testing people for blood and different biomatter. And that's everything from DNA to physical liquid blood from the deceased on any person's, because anytime you shoot someone with a weapon, there's a lot of force in that impact, and our bodies are mostly liquid. And when you puncture a hole in that with a lot of force, shit goes everywhere. And a lot of that goes back onto the person who's the shooter if you're within a certain distance. And all of the shootings, all of the rounds that hit both Paul and Maggie were proven to be within 3 to 5 feet at the furthest. So that's very much within the distance that the shooter would be covered in Paul and Maggie's blood and body parts, because their bodies were destroyed in the shooting. This wasn't like just a few holes, like
especially with the shotgun. I mean, that's going to really spray. And so they were able to determine, because of the wadding and the stippling, that he was Paul at least was shot at somewhat of a close distance. How were they able to determine that Maggie was the wife?
I think it's because of, and there's a number of ways to do this. You were able to establish what caliber did the killing or shooting or whatever, and based on knowing what, because if it's a BB gun or a pellet gun or a 22 that you shoot somebody with, it's going to have very different signs of, evidence that they were shot with that, as far as entry points, exit wounds, damage done to the internal body cavity. And so bullets do different things. It's all physics. Like the further a bullet travels, the less velocity it will have, the less impact it will have. And so you can begin to distinguish range of where that bullet was fired from based on where the shell casings were ejected from the gun, the level of damage done to the body. But I think the biggest one was just, it had to be done in tight quarters in a lot of areas, because this wasn't an expansive, wide open. They weren't killed in a field. They were killed up against buildings with tight quarters in some of the areas. But the biggest thing was the bullet trajectories in the bodies kind of proved what angles they could have been shot at. And given some of the angles, it had to be really close to the body. Otherwise, the gun would be like on the ground.
Gotcha. And we'll get to that. I want to get to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So move on from there. He comes, he sees them, what have you, calls the police, calls 911, and then proceeds to do, and we're going to talk about that, which is he lies to them about some things. So when you first heard about this and maybe saw the book, I mean, my first thing before even is like, oh, they obviously, dude did it, but it'll be an interesting trial to watch. And then I'm watching the DA's evidence that they're putting on. They brought in, as you said, a ton of this financial stuff. So I could talk about the procedural things, and people are like, oh, well, it'll be on an appeal. By the way, an appeal is only about something procedurally or that the judge ruled on. And then when it goes to an appeal, you don't have a new trial unless they remand it back for a trial or something to do, like hear something. But it's usually like, it typically doesn't work that way. They don't have a new trial at the appeal. If they appeal it and it goes back down, then they may have a new trial then. But so people are thinking that you get a chance to redo everything. No, you've got to basically that there was an error of some sort, which we're going to talk about, which is letting in all this financial stuff. There's evidence has to be relative to the situation and not too prejudicial. There's this balancing act that they take there. So they're bringing all this financial stuff. Have you found any of that persuasive? And I know the true crime people are probably just jizzing in their pants about a lot of that stuff, but it seems like to me it's a lot of hand waving when the reality is, and we'll get to it, kind of this data that happens to be around it. Have you found any of that persuasive? I guess okay.
No, in short, the financial stuff to me, The only way that it could be, and this was going into the trial, was if they could tie that the financial embezzlement cases, and over 99 charges that he has, by the way, that if any of those, if they were brought up or allowed in, would they fight it and say, nope, that's not me, never did it? And then for me, that would make me think, oh, he's probably guilty then, because like this is the clearest case of shoddy embezzlement of all time.
Right. And that's something to think about too. Like how good was he at doing this and then preparing himself for this elaborate murder?
Correct. And there's another situation we'll discuss that happened 3 months after the murders that will further bolster that claim. But I would say no, the financial stuff to me is more white collar. Yeah. Embezzlement isn't a crime of passion. It's not a crime of anger. It's a crime of opportunity. Yeah. And planning, I guess, to a degree. But when you're talking about murder, and if we're to believe that this involves a family member murdering his wife and son, I don't see how those two correlate. And I was hoping that the state would have some mystery bridge that they could build between the two that would provide motive. That has never happened. That's never come into this case. It's only been for character, character establishment. That this guy's just a dirtbag.
By the way, they're not showing he and his wife were going to get a divorce. They're not showing any of this kind of stuff, or were they? I mean, I haven't seen anything like that. It's no one, like everyone's like, oh, good relationship. His sons, 20 some or whatever, still living at home, even with this boat thing, still taking care of him. So it seems perfectly normal there. They haven't drug up any kind of evidence that there's a reason. Now they're saying that this boat case and some other ones that he did this to kind of push things off, or the finances still were happening, and he didn't cover that up after the fact. So that didn't stop that. The boat case going on, mom had said something like she'd pay everything and ruin her finances and start over. It wasn't a problem. The Maggie, the wife. So killing them, it didn't really do much. Matter of fact, he's testified, and we'll talk about his testimony, that it has actually made it more difficult to get money because the house, I guess that one was all in her name. Now, community property, it's not. And he goes, yeah, but she had signed whatever and we'd get a loan. But now it's in probate and it's a murder. It's just much more difficult. Yeah.
So that goes to the introducing of evidence that you would think would lead to some level of, the clamp's really on him and he had to kill him in order to get out of this situation. None of that lines up. Yeah. Killing them does nothing to alleviate any of those issues that were inevitably coming, but that were also not known at the time of the murder. He didn't
have life insurance on her, he said today as well.
Or Paul.
Yeah.
Neither one of them. And a minor correction, but I want to mention this. Paul had his own place, if I remember correctly. He was living, I think, in Columbia. He also was staying with friends in Charleston, but he also spent some time living at Moselle, getting the hunting property ready for things. So he kind of lived in like 3 different places. The wife, Maggie, was staying at their beach house in Edisto, beach town down on the coast near Charleston, which she preferred in the late spring and summertime because you had coastal breeze, less bugs. It wasn't as dirty. And the reason why both Paul and Maggie were at Moselle was because Alex had requested that they come back home because Alex's dad was basically entering hospice and he didn't have much time left, which the state is trying to say he lured them back to murder them because reasons. But if anybody's ever had an elderly family member that is on their way out, it is the most normal thing for family to get together for, just comfort, for visitation, or to be there for the inevitable. To me, that proves nothing other than that they were a caring family. But they're trying to say that it was a luring in order to murder them.
Right. So look, a lot of these crime podcasting it's insurance, it's something else. You're cheating, right? So instead of just getting a divorce, you kill them, these kind of things. Nothing like that is happening. So it's really drawing the inference is rough for me, the bridge to cross to say that is. Now, once again, I'm expecting, and you watch CSI and these other things and these great forensics, and it really ties them in, and they're caught. So one of those things is he's doing all these drugs. It comes out that, and he talked to the cops a bunch. People, we'll just say this here: don't talk to the cops, especially if your wife gets murdered. It's probably the best thing to do. And there's some of he's an attorney and he doesn't know better. But if you think he's innocent, that he didn't kill them, the last thing you're thinking is to protect you're like, I'm going to tell him everything because I'm innocent and it's not going to be a problem. Assuming that's the case. He says this, that they were at the house with him. Then they went to the kennel. He fell asleep. Then he went to his mom's, then comes back. Oh my God, they're dead. Later, they find a Snapchat where his voice is on there very close to the time of the murders. Now, the time that they're getting at is through data from phones, iPhones, walking around your Apple Health stuff, tracks your steps, your GPS, your location services were all on, car data, OnStar, the ability for a phone to turn on and off type of thing, just from moving it, orientation stuff, his OnStar stuff. So all this comes about. There's a Snapchat that shows that he was down there and he had never said so before, and he ends up taking the stand. So first of all, what else was there with the data? There was something else. Her phone got left. Paul's phone was tipped upside down. Walk us through some of those things as well, and his lie. Okay, so everyone has phones. That's not abnormal. Maggie has a phone. Paul has a phone. Alex, I think, has had 2 phones at the time, which means he's got to be guilty. But no, sure. Paul's phone was located on Paul's person. It was alleged that it was in his pocket at the time that he was murdered. When he got the kill shot that pretty much turned his lights off, he just fell face first. When Paul shows up, he tries to roll Paul over. And this is all Alex's story. When he tries to roll him over, the phone falls out of his... By the way, that was his story at the time, too. Correct. Immediately, right out of the gate. And so Paul's phone falls out of his pocket. Alex grabs the phone, claims to say he was thinking about using it maybe to call whoever. I don't know. I don't know what he was doing. Then again, what do you do? What is the right thing to do when you're in that kind of scenario? He quickly bails on that idea of using Paul's phone for any purposes, immediately places it on Paul, goes over to Maggie. Maggie does not have her phone with her. It is later discovered that Maggie's phone is found, I think, the next day. Investigators found it, I think, up to half a mile away from her body. And, maybe that might be a good point for any lead up or follow up questions about phones. Because there's a lot. They spend a lot of time trying to use GPS this and steps, 287 steps at this time. And the last time the phone was oriented. And one thing I will say about this trial that should be concerning to anybody if you have a smartphone, it literally tracks everything. Yes. If you just pull your phone up to your face and the screen lights up, there's a record of that. If it unlocks with your face, it records that. If you take your phone from this to this and rotate it, it picks that up as well. It records it's recording everything I'm saying now, I'm sure. But that was kind of the surprising thing that was exposed in this is when they start to, I think when the evidence is so shitty that you have to dig as deep as you can to find any evidence, you start exposing a lot of things that the general public never knew, which is how many things can actually place you where you actually are. And so the fact that Alex didn't know that, or he knew that, but he didn't know that there was a Snapchat video that Paul made, which is why I think he told the story he told, because he thought and let's be honest, if there was no video that Paul made, that lie stands for all time. There's no way that they would be able to prove that he did anything other than what he claimed. It's only because of the phone data that
places him there at a different time that he initially stated that starts to raise an eyebrow.
Right. So I look, he's smart enough to know, and then he did take the stand, which was somewhat questionable whether that should be the case or not. And I think it's the right thing to do. It's a Hail Mary. He's got to, at this point, explain himself away. And we'll kind of talk about some of those things as well. But I think the data, if anything, and he says here, at the time, I'm telling you times this, but check my phone. He knew that, there was tracing. He knew a lot of these things. When he did take the stand, the prosecutor tried to make the comment that you've done cases, you've done, things with phones and whatnot. You knew what you were supposed to do. The problem is when all this data comes out, they can't tie some of these things together. They're having a tough time. And you made it to begin with you think it's two shooters. And if that's the case, maybe it is him and someone else, but they're able to track his OnStar data, his phone, her phone, and they don't correlate to it getting tossed on the side of the road with his. And that to me is a problem. So regardless of all his lies, let's say he's lying up a storm, which he admitted to today, but then it's the typical thing of, well, you've lied all the time. How do I know when you are ever telling the truth, which is, a reasonable thing to assume. Once again, the data, you still got, no matter if he's a liar or not, this data is still a problem.
Yeah. And if you're a good defense attorney, or like Alex being an attorney himself, you can use that evidence as a bolstering argument for your own case, saying, yes, I did lie. I lied about all of this stuff, and I'm coming clean about that. I'm admitting that, which shows a little bit of humility and a level of trust building, saying, yes, I lied, but I'm not lying about this.
So why did he lie at the time? He lied about what specifically, and what do you think his reasons for lying were?
So the biggest thing that he lied about was his timeline that places him. He tried to distance his placement. He tried to distance himself from the murder scene, which, let's just be honest, I think that's what anybody would do in a self-preservation mode. Yeah. I think that one of the things, and I'm surprised we haven't talked about this yet, 50 plus minutes in, an aspect to his lying could very plausibly be tied to his opiate addiction. Yeah. A big part that came out in this case during, I think, discovery and really just the investigation was, he had to go to rehab because he was fighting off a 20-year opiate addiction. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a year was spent on opiates. And
they were estimating 50,000 a day.
No, 50,000 a week.
A week, sorry.
A week, yeah.
That makes
Which
a
is
difference, but still, that's.
I mean, might as well be 50,000 an hour, because no human alive can ingest $50,000 worth of drugs a week, and A, be alive, B, be in a state where they can pull off a perfect double murder and leave no physical evidence. Much less, if anybody has seen any pictures or video of Alex at this time, if you see the trial now, he's very slender compared to what he was in 2021. He was an overweight, heading on his way to obese land. He was well over 260 pounds. He said himself. I think he was heavier than that. But he was an out of shape, overweight, pillhead, opiate addict that we are led to believe by the state's own testimony and evidence that he had 22 minutes to pull off the perfect double murder using two separate weapons, killing his two closest loved ones, leaving no physical evidence.
Right. Okay. So let's get to some of these forensic things. So the state puts on their case. They talk about this data, phone orientations, blah, blah, blah. What's SLED, first of all?
SLED stands for South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. They leave out the C, but they add Law Enforcement Division. They're like, we just want it to be cool, man. SLEDs. Yeah, and I agree with Kane. The only thing that I will not disagree with, but real quick sidebar, want to point out one of Kane's earlier comments. He said he is innocent. I don't know if I'll even say he's innocent. All I'm going to argue, at least in this portion of the trial and on this podcast, is that I think he's not guilty. And we'll get to different possible
I don't
scenarios.
think the prosecution at all met their burden. I'll say that. But the more I've gone, especially when we'll talk about SLED and their forensic stuff, I thought Alex's mechanical engineer, as me being one former one myself, was brilliant and unflappable. And also, and we'll just get to real quick as to why he didn't try to be a king of everything. He's like, this is what I know. Oh, I know about that, but this is what I know. I'm not going to speculate on that. And so he didn't take it outside the box. And then what he did was he used all the data that SLED had provided, and he conducted his analysis with that. And it's just like, I'm just using what you're doing, and now I'm applying physics. I'm not a cop that got a weekend certificate to do forensic. I'm an actual fucking scientist. So anyway, let's start back with the SLED and their process through, and then we'll talk about his side.
So SLED is kind of like a higher level law enforcement for the state of South Carolina. Here in Georgia, we have the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah.
They're the one that come in over the top of the local police, but under the feds. They're like the highest level law enforcement in the state that perform investigations into murders and high level crimes, things that normal patrolmen and everyday beat cops aren't qualified for, frankly.
There's a TV show right now about one of those things called Trent Wilson or something. He's a GBI guy. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Sweet. I'll have to check it out.
It's on Hulu.
Fuck yeah. So what happens anytime that you have a scenario like what happened out at Moselle is person calls 911, dispatch sends the nearest officers, just regular road cops. Their job is to come and get initial witness statement, start a log of time of events, and rope off the area to be allegedly preserved so that the leading investigation agency, in this case SLED, will have their area to work in that is non-molested. That is the idea. SLED, there's a lot of dirty, shady shit that went on with SLED. It came out today, I think, maybe even yesterday, in testimony by Alex that he didn't trust them. He thought that they were corrupted, and that this was a bit of a headhunt. There were a lot of things that were missed.
Like what?
So they weren't able to locate any murder weapons, and they weren't able to place a time of death. It was all in an estimation, like a guess. Like their forensics were kind of shoddy, like you expect with that much physical evidence on site, with the bodies and the shell casings, and the phone telemetry. Yeah, words with syllables. You would think that they would be able to come up with a more rigid case. But what came out in testimony, I think this was last week, was the lead SLED investigator. I forget his name. It came out that he lied to the grand jury on 2 different occasions about evidence that didn't exist. Yes, exactly. He lied about the loadout of the shotgun, because this is something that is particular about this case, is that the shotgun rounds that were used to kill Paul were slightly abnormal, I guess, but they were unique in a manner that should stand out, because it wasn't just 2 slugs or 2 buckshot or 2 birdshot. It was like a turkey load. It was, and I might get this wrong, it was like buckshot and then turkey load. And turkey load is just a heavier gauge BB, if you want to call it that, in the shotgun shell, that's bigger than, say, like a waterfowl or dove or something like that. And the fact that you hit something, you have a buckshot and then a bird shot, that's not, I guess, the most abnormal, but that's not a rig that you would set up for hunting. If you're hunting deer, you would have buckshot or maybe buckshot slug, if you were hopeful that you're going to get close to a deer. If you were hunting waterfowl or turkey, you would have 2 bird shot loads in there consecutively. This one had big game and water or turkey. That's somebody just grabbing something that's close by and throwing it in a shotgun and running. And so the lead investigator claimed that there were other shotguns found on the property that belonged to Alex that were loaded in the same manner, which is false. Not a single shotgun on the property was loaded in that manner. And he played quick and loose with, in fact, I have the exact moment when he did it. I might, if we're interested in hearing it, I could send it to you.
Yeah.
But,
or can you share it on yours with probably not. If you can, you want to just put it in the private chat.
let's see if I can do this. I know I texted it to some people. If you can filibuster for just a quick minute, I can get it wrapped up.
Right. I definitely could do that. So maybe we should play this too. There's a skit by Dave Chappelle, and he talks about birdshot, buckshot, birdshot, buckshot, buckshot. Hey, warn him, sting him a bit, do it again. And then the last one is like on you, something like that. So it's actually kind of funny that the two different kind of loads that they go in there. Yeah. This guy gets up. What's amazing is if it's what I think you're going to give me here, it's going to show, Kane says lied about blood evidence too. I don't remember that one, but yeah, and by the way, you can, and he was lying to Alex at one point during and he's like, hey, we're allowed to trick him. And I'm like, okay, but you're not allowed to trick the grand jury, because the grand jury, you get an indictment from the grand jury, which they say you can indict a ham sandwich. However, maybe what your lies did there, they were material enough to indict him, to get him to where we're even at right now, because that seems a little shaky. So, okay.
And that's the exact moment that this should display.
Okay. So let me pause it here.
And it takes about 3 to 4 minutes, because the rate at which this trial moves, like I said, it's a 5-week trial that should have been over in a week and a half. So it takes probably 3 to 4 minutes for him to fully expose exactly what Kane said in the comments, that he basically committed perjury to the grand jury. But this is it, in his own words.
I want to make sure that you can hear this first. So
in the interview, you told.
Can you hear that?
Yep.
All good. Okay. Let's play this. About 1.25. Let's go.
Alec, that there were multiple guns found on the property that were loaded with buckshot and turkey load. Do you remember that?
I believe I used buckshot, birdshot.
Okay. Well, I mean, Agent Croft testified. Can you identify any weapons that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot that were found in the house?
Repeat the question.
Can you identify any weapons found in the house at Moselle that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot?
No, sir.
Wow. Obviously, there's no way they could have excluded him.
When you told Alec that there were multiple weapons loaded with that same load, buckshot and birdshot, I mean, was that an investigative tool, or were you just under the misimpression that was the case?
Investigative tool.
So you lied to him.
So you lied.
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response.
Good.
He lied.
Good. Point out that he lied.
Pause it right
I'm allowed
there.
to use trickery to elicit a response. Yes.
So just so everyone knows, by the way, hang on.
Did.
Oh, sorry. We're playing this off of Good Logic's website, or YouTube channel. He does really good. By the way, you look at the top here. Joe is his name. He's an attorney in New York. Next one is Law of Self-Defense. Bronca. He gets into fights all the time with Michael Malice. Steve Gosney at the bottom. I think he's DA stuff. I think he actually he's
a public defender in Florida. Uber nerd, but all, good dude.
On civil law, I forget his real name, but he just moved to Texas. Kurt, yeah. They spend all day doing. They can't practice law. I know they used to be good. Gosney, I think, is the only one that does, because everyone says, I gotta. None of these guys practice law anymore, and it blows me away. And I'm a bit jealous. If I could make the money I do watching YouTube videos all day, fuck me. Okay, sorry, you wanted to say something.
No, it was just that moment right there, and the amount of eyes that are on this trial, I think probably is in the Rittenhouse, somewhere between Rittenhouse and Johnny Depp level, because of the
Depp was the other one I'd watched too.
Yeah, but because of the true crime podcast documentaries, wine moms going mad on the internet, just talking about all this shit. It has drummed up a lot of interest in it. For this to come out, I think is very important and very eye-opening for, I think, a lot of normies, that it's like, holy shit, you have the lead investigator of the highest law enforcement agency in the state of South Carolina, openly admitting that, and this isn't anything new to you and me, but for a lot of the uninitiated that just don't know, yes, cops are well within their right to lie to you in order to elicit a response, because this guy does not have an obligation to find the truth. His obligation is to get you to compel you to speak so that he can at least have someone that he can point the fingers at that can then go to trial.
Right.
The idea that they are truth seekers or truth finders, truth is a pretty obligatory term. It's truth within whatever parameters make the most sense for this case. It doesn't have to be what happened. It just has to be what can fit the narrative that they can lead to a possible conviction. And correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm not an attorney. I'm not in law enforcement or law anything. But that is my understanding of it. And for that to come out on the stand where he's under oath, so he can't lie here. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly. The fact that he doesn't lie and exposes that, yes, I lied in order to get the information I wanted. Was pretty telling.
And I know they're going to play that soon here. What you're specifically talking to is he's interrogating you. He can lie all he wants, and and that's perfectly fine. And sometimes that's fine. They're like, hey, the trickery, that's perfect. That's great. If you lie to like an FBI agent, that's a damnable offense.
Mm-hmm.
We learned that with Trump. I think there were some of his people that were doing that. So that's. But they can lie to you all they want. Just be aware of that. And I think that's exactly what you're saying there. Yeah. And by the way, lying in court, I've seen it with police officers. They have no problems doing so. And look, if you want to give them any benefit of the doubt, they see shit all the time. They know you're guilty. Maybe this isn't the thing. And they just need to kind of massage it to get it there because they've seen people that are just trash and getting away with little technical terms or technicalities. And so we're just going to get them anyway, because they truly do need it. And you watch TV shows, that cop that's rogue, and in your heart, you just love him because he got the bad guy anyway, Al Capone for taxes or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to keep going this?
Just last statement, and then you can hit play. The sentiment of, for this investigator, dirty work is police work. They don't mind if they have to play dirty, as long as they get the results they want. That is the objective there. But the video continues, and actually the interesting part comes up right after this.
Okay. I was just putting you in focus so we can see.
I appreciate it.
Burn him.
Liar.
But you also testified under oath in front of the state grand jury. You said basically the same thing, that there were 4 shotguns on the Moselle property and they were loaded with buckshot and turkey load.
Are you allowed to lie to grand jury?
Now, were you mistaken then, or were you trying to trick the state grand jury?
Nice. Get him.
No, I was not trying to trick the state grand jury.
You were mistaken.
No.
What, did you not?
The shotguns that we recovered from the house had 2 different loads in them. They weren't Winchester or Federal. They had different loads in them. So when I told the state grand jury.
So explain that real quick, because I had to rewind this. I'm like, oh, he's talking now. What he's talking about is manufacturers, the difference in manufacture, different cartridges or whatnot. Not what you indicated, which is buckshot, birdshot, or what have you. Correct.
Correct. So the equivalent would be, we have bloody footprints that they are a very specific type of boot. And when we were investigating the alleged, Alex's house, we found that he had Nike's tennis shoes, and Reeboks. So he had, or let's say the murderer was wearing hiking boots and flip flops, and so that's two very different, or barefoot, 2 very different pieces of footwear. And then they go, well, Alex had Nikes and Reeboks, so he also had different footwear. It's 2 different manufacturers. It has nothing to do with the specific type of ammunition that was used. Winchester and Remington and any other ammunition manufacturer, Winchester makes all of the calibers and all the different types of ammunition that are found in 90% of the most commonly sold firearms in America. So does fill in the blank, other ammunition manufacturer. The fact that it's a variation from Remington to Winchester to fill in the blank, Eagle Talons or whatever, that means nothing. That's literally nothing, and that is the most common thing. Like I myself, I don't even know how many rounds of ammunition I have. It's not illegal to have as much as I want, so it's not like I'm incriminating myself. But I have every major manufacturer in America. If this guy were to come to my house, he could say, "Oh, you have a shotgun and a 300 blackout, and you have different loads because you have different manufacturer ammunition." That is so dirty. That is not saying, because I don't have turkey load or buckshot at all in my house. But this guy, I would meet the threshold of a murderer in his investigation, and that's fucking terrifying.
Right. So I'm gonna try to back just a tad here. See if I can do this as a long one, because I want to play this specifically. So the DA does the defense attorney does a great job first of saying, different loads and buckshot, birdshot, and he's like, no, here's what it is. Here's what I actually said. And then when he confronts him with it, he's like, "Yeah, it's the truth." Okay, so we'll go through that, and then the killer is a tad bit. Wait, where are we at here? Let's see if we could. Okay.
Shot and birdshot.
No, sir.
Wow. Obviously, there's no way they could have excluded him.
When you told Alec that there were multiple weapons loaded with that same load, buckshot and birdshot, I mean, was that an investigative tool, or were you just under the misimpression that was the case?
Investigative tool.
So you lied to him.
So you lied.
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response.
Good.
He lied.
Good. Point out that he lied.
Agreed?
I'm allowed to use trickery to elicit a response. Yes.
Nice.
Aha.
Good.
Are you
And
using
you're allowed
trickery
to do
now?
it, and you did it.
Yes.
Burn him.
Liar.
But you also testified under oath in front of the state grand jury. You said basically the same thing, that there were 4 shotguns on the Moselle property and they were loaded with buckshot and turkey load.
Are you allowed to lie to grand jury?
Now, were you mistaken then, or were you trying to trick the state grand jury?
Nice. Get him.
No. I was not trying to trick the state grand jury.
You were mistaken.
No.
Did you not?
The shotguns that we recovered from the house had 2 different loads in them. They weren't Winchester or Federal. They had different loads in them. So when I tell the state grand jury that there's different loads in the shotguns, there were different loads in the shotgun.
So you're saying you weren't telling them that it was buckshot and turkey load, but you were telling them it was just different brand names of something.
I may have used buckshot and turkey load or birdshot, but they were 2 different loads.
Oh, so you
Well,
may
I
have
think
you
we
may have lied a
established
little
that
bit
you
to the
did
grand jury.
SLED did not find any weapons at the house with buckshot and turkey load loaded in, right?
That is correct.
A liar. What a ridiculous liar.
Another little inconsistency that you have to explain. Okay. It's not like it's important or anything.
Yeah, it's just
the
a
water.
third-degree
Hey, drink that
felony.
water, buddy. Drink that water.
Is it perjury?
Glug, glug,
Lying to a
glug.
grand jury is a perjury, right?
It is.
Just checking.
So if you lie to grand jury, would you lie to us?
Page 48, line.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, that'd be a good follow-up question. So you're mistaken the grand jury. What are you mistaken about now? Nothing. Sure.
Objection.
Want to read from the transcript?
Yeah,
Yes.
so he's trying to wiggle out of it, but
Impeach.
he's already said it. So here we go. Here's the way you do deposition impeachment.
Are you going to impeach in bad space of the grand jury testimony? Oh.
Make him read it out loud.
Hey, gentlemen, do you recognize that to be a copy of your state grand jury testimony?
Oh, this is freaking great.
Oh, this is so good.
This is like the most uncomfortable page flipping in you. It's like, damn it, yes it is.
Hey, maybe Griffin's wrong here. Maybe he'll blow it.
Sure.
And what date?
Want to take a wager on that, Bronca?
Tuesday, November 16th, 2021.
All right, and if you'll go to the page I had open, and I tell you, I'm going to read the question if you'll read the response.
So you
It says,
Please say exactly what you said.
This is really good.
line 7. All right, and we're all of them, to your recollection, loaded that like that. And your answer was?
They were loaded in a similar fashion. Yes.
Question, in a similar fashion?
Yes, sir.
Question, with 1 turkey load and 1 buckshot load.
Response, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Holy cow.
That was not
Freaking
accurate.
liar.
Okay. Is there any more I need
That's
to
it.
play?
Wow.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. So that's solid. So look, let's get moving on here to some of these other things. So he comes in. It says this. There's all this other data that comes in. I then the defense brings on their case. They brought they had two guys that were really good. And like I said, the mechanical engineer came in. He did 3D laser analysis or printing or modeling, I guess, of the whole scene. He says he finds a buckshot or a pellet in the window that they hadn't done before. He's able to account for it because of the angles and everything.
Yeah.
By the way, the DA's or the prosecutor's expert had said that at some point with the angles that it had to go down lower, and at some point, you had this line of trajectory that it would extend into the earth. So some angles. So break down kind of what that guy did, and then, by the way, it was really disingenuous too when they had the data of the OnStar driving from his mom's or to his mom's, and they gave an average speed of like 40 some miles an hour, and then they said a maximum speed of 80. Why are you driving 80 miles an hour? This is ridiculous. But that's a one data point when the average is like 40 something. Anyway, those two things are interesting to me.
Okay, so first I'll get into the defense witness that the engineer guy, which I will agree. I thoroughly enjoyed his testimony because he was able to provide visual demonstrative aids, which is what the state has been incapable of providing. Now, granted, the crime scene photos are under seal because of the brutality nature, so we haven't been able to see those. But those are the only visual aids that the state has been able to provide. What the defense was able to provide, like you said, it was a 3D model of the area. And the way that he does that is this technology has been around for years. I used to be in engineering and land surveying and shit like that, where you could get an instrument that shoots over 1 million points per second or per minute or whatever, that can fully replicate in 3D the area in which you're interested in. And so this guy did that and then used all of the information from SLED with one caveat. The thing that you mentioned where he was able to retrieve one of the BBs from the shotgun, it was immediately noticed on even the first arrival of the patrolman. They noticed that there were holes in the window at the back of the feed room where Paul was murdered, and behind that room were pine trees. There were just rows of pine trees. And so any investigator worth a shit would have said, let's go look at those pine trees and see if we can retrieve a pellet so that we can better understand what ammunition was used. They were able to locate in one of the first trees a area where there was gunshot impact. And so what this defense witness did was traced the trajectory from the point of impact in the tree through the window, the hole in the window, all the way through to where the door was, where the perceived shooter would have been at time of shooting Paul. And that is how he was able to kind of replicate the scenario that possibly and more than likely went down at time of Paul's death. I'm sorry, I kind of went on for long enough.
No,
that I forgot.
that was great. And so what he ended up deducing with shotgun shells that are out there, and he had a 24-foot or inch pattern or foot pattern. I think it was 24 foot, somewhere around there, of where it could be sliding the gun on this, because obviously we need a straight line. It's not the magic bullet, people. He deduces a height.
There was only one of those.
Right. A height that this person, and by the way, they have the shotgun like low down on the, like you're like some gangster throwing these things. I wouldn't have assumed that that's how the person would be shooting, but if it's down low or if it's on their, on their one knee or even up high, it had to be within this certain range of height only, could be. And he said 5'2" he stretched it to 5'6" maybe. Now, Alex is 6'4" easy. Yeah. So there's problems with, and fat at the time too. So there's
very fat.
Yeah. So I thought that guy was great because he was, once again, he was just using all their data. He kind of was similar to what the other person had said about, this angles and stuff. But he didn't try to act like he knew everything. I thought that was really important for an expert. If you want them on this one thing, then you start asking him on others. He's just, that's not me. I'm all about science. The prosecutors are assholes, by the way. When they think, I don't know why they have to be such dicks. Anything else on him? And because then he talked about the road data. And the only thing he was able to say there was when the phone was tossed or whatever, when Alex was driving by this place, he was doing, 40 some miles an hour. So he didn't pull over because it looked, I guess the phone wasn't, I don't know. There's something weird about the phone in the pulling on the time with Alex there. So
this is where I got you here.
Okay. That's what you're here for.
So the state is saying that the last time that Maggie's phone, because Maggie's phone was the only phone that was removed from the site, and it's plausible to, to ascertain that the way that the phone landed at its final resting place was because it was moved there by the murderer.
Yeah.
Totally plausible, totally fine. Got no problem with that. They tried to establish a timeline that the last time that Maggie's phone was manipulated, I think, was like around 9:06 or something like that, maybe 9:02. I could be off on these level of details because it's been a very long trial. But anyway, the last moment that Maggie's phone had an orientation change, like I said earlier, your phone tracks every time your phone is even turned. The last one of those is what the state is claiming is when the phone is tossed. When that happens, if you then jump over to Alex's phone records and vehicle records, his car is just starting up at the house. So the same data that the state is trying to introduce as saying that this is, hard evidence also puts Alex so far away from where this is happening that immediately that is reasonable doubt. Again, not guilty. The amount of times that there's reasonable doubt introduced in this case is mind blowing to me. But anyway, that's just one further one. But what they tried to do with the OnStar thing and accelerating and driving past the location of Maggie's phone, once Alex does drive past the location of where Maggie's phone is located, it is minutes after Maggie's phone's last orientation change or record of manipulation whatsoever. They then point out and spend a lot of time saying that, well, here's Alex's Suburban going 42 miles an hour right at the area that Maggie's phone is found the next day. And then it quickly accelerates to 44 miles an hour. And then 30 seconds later, it goes all the way up to the jostling speed of 46 miles an hour. So in over a minute's time on a country road that they're later going to prove that he can actually drive 80 miles an hour on these backcountry roads.
Right.
He accelerates 4 miles an hour in a minute's time. That just also happens to correspond with where Maggie's phone's located. Now,
this is a guy with pre-diabetes in his feet. He doesn't have that much control. Let me just say.
So there's 2 points I want to make. The first one being, so like I said, I have a lot of time on my hands. I'm a fucking autist or whatever. Right. I've Google Earth this whole place. Like I said, I was near the area of where the trial was happening, and I've got all the locations that all from the boat accident to everything mapped out. And so anytime you left that property, if you're going to go into town or go to Alameda where Alex's mom was, you would always hang a right. Him passing by the location of where the phone was found means nothing because the vast majority of time, if you were going anywhere out of that property, you were going to hang a right out of the drive and head in that direction. The killers did it, whoever the killers are. Alex did it. Everything of interest was always in that direction. So him driving past it means diddly fuck.
You just literally said the killers did it and Alex did it. I think you just tied the two together.
Burn him alive.
Right.
So that's one thing. Another thing is, shit. What was the other thing? There were two things there. Oh, okay. Here's another one. And this one, I'm surprised they didn't say, or maybe they did, but I missed it. And this is just for average, everyday normies, aka jurors. How many times, and maybe not even how many times has this happened, because how many times are you throwing phones out of cars? But on what instance would a phone that has a glass screen and metal edging be thrown from a vehicle moving at 40 fill in the blank miles an hour and receive no cracked screen, no abrasions on the casing, and no surface level impact markings at all. Like, would you throw your phone just to try it out? Would you drive 40 miles an hour on the road outside your neighborhood and just toss it to be like, let's put this to the test? No. Her phone, in evidence photos, her phone is immaculate. There's not a scuff, a scrape, not even nothing to show that it was thrown from a vehicle moving at any rate of speed.
Were they able to, do they have any data that, since this phone is showing every time they're moving it, of how it got put there?
No, it's just saying the last time it was manipulated was at this time, and it was located in this area. It was found in this area. Therefore, we think that last motion change had to have happened here.
Gotcha.
And that's because there's no way to prove, because you can literally, well, I guess technically if you're carrying a phone as you're walking, that should track steps. Even if you're in a car, getting in and out of a car, that should track steps. It just goes from lock screen to it tries to open, it does not open, and then a screenshot is taken of a Facebook app, is what they classify it as, and then the phone's found a day later. I don't know how you cannot unlock the phone, yet you can take a screenshot of Facebook. None of this makes sense, is my point. Their evidence is shoddy at best, and it does not line up to any level of what any of us would normally interact with a phone would make sense.
Now, SLED took this phone in, and I guess they lost some data as well. Some tracking data. Do you remember hearing about that? Some GPS?
Yeah, I don't remember the particulars. I just know that the last known GPS information, I think, was hours and hours and hours before the murders. Like maybe even the day before. I mean, they weren't able to GPS locate Maggie's phone, I don't think, by normal usage until like she was heading to Moselle. The next time they were able to do that was when Alex gave them the Find My Phone Apple ID password so that they could then go literally locate the phone.
Gotcha. Okay, so we have that, and then Alex decides to take the stand. And first of all, let me drop back just a little bit. The judges are frustrating me a tad bit. If you watch any of these other trials, you start to get the feeling for objections, right? That was really a big deal in like leading or what have you. What, if any, was the solution for that in Johnny Depp trial? The attorneys aren't objecting a lot either. And no. it's driving me a bit batty. And then when they do, they get frustrated that it's not sustained. But I just feel like you got to be on these things. Sometimes as an attorney, I do a lot of trials. You are just not objecting because you want this narrative to come out. Either the other party is, you're like, they're going to kill themselves, what they're going to, and you just let this go. Or your client is that kind of person. You want it to go. And so both attorneys are just kind of doing this. So there's some of that I get. Now he goes and takes a stand, and today there's just a conversation back and forth, and it's blowing my mind that this is like high-powered attorneys, and both of them are just letting they're arguing. On cross-examination, the prosecutor is literally just having arguments with him in a conversation that it blows my mind that it's happening, but I mean, it is. First of all, are you glad he took the stand? Is this a good thing?
I think finally there's interest because I'm not going to lie. Over 80% of this trial has been mind-numbingly boring.
Yeah, the financial stuff is just
very laborious, and not knowing what direction it was going to end up going. Like, what are you getting at? What are you leading to? Even the defense sometimes takes hours to get to a point that should have been 15 minutes. Boom, boom, slam, slam. Jury will remember that we are here to, get to an end at some point, because the jurors don't like just sitting there.
No.
Week after week and extension after extension. So the fact that neither side is really putting forth any effort to expedite this really makes me want to just say, Eric, I know the whole speedy trial thing is about like getting to trial in a certain amount of time. It has nothing to do with the length of time of a trial, but maybe it fucking should. But one thing real quick, and I don't want to derail you, but because you are an attorney and you have, vastly, you have thousands of percent more experience in a courtroom than I do. You briefly you mentioned it as far as like the interaction between the judge and what he allows in. I guess here's my question. I would imagine at this point, this far into the trial, the defense is not objecting because they know it's basically fruitless. The judge won't uphold any of their objections. Does that negate the need to object, or for possible appeals, do you still object even knowing you're going to lose? Like if you were in this courtroom with this judge, would his actions or lack thereof for the last up until now, would that change how you object or not object?
Now it depends if you maybe have a local rule or a state rule about objections. I do this quite often. Sometimes it's if you do, especially in family law, which I do all the time. If the party isn't even represented, they don't maybe understand all the rules of court, and so. Or an attorney that's not great about these, and they're not they're leading the witness, and so you're objecting to these things, or you just have a hearsay or some of these other ones. I've got to the point where a judge, I'll just say, I'm not going to keep interrupting, but it's a standing objection to this. Okay, it's just going forward. We're just having a standing objection to all of this, so you preserve that on the record for whatever these are. There could be that, or they just. Or they need to sometimes always object and have that taken care of. But yes, you're sometimes because you can screw things up by if you're not objecting to something and then judge isn't making a ruling on it, you're not establishing a reason to have an appeal on something, right? And if the judge is continually letting in and you're not objecting, you're kind of missing all that. But I think he's got some big rulings. The finances is one of them. What else? Oh, the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment issues that came in today. I'll talk about those real quickly, which is, and when they came back from lunch or whatever, and they had a little bit of a discussion, I thought the DA actually pinpointed it a little bit better, made me think, okay, I could at least see the objection. Here's what it is. Alex takes the stand. He had said, before in these interviews, before he was Mirandized, and seek counsel and said he's not going to talk anymore. He had said, I never went down to the kennels. Okay, now the evidence comes out, so it's there. And so now he's in court talking about it, that he went down there. So the counsel comes up and he's making a big deal, tries to say that Alex is now changing his story, and he never came and told us about it before. So there's an objection because at some point you took the Fifth, and you can't, if you remember this from Rittenhouse, it was a big deal. Binger was almost like, thrown out of court for it, which is you never talked about this. And it's like, well, when you take you take and invoke your Fifth Amendment right, and you get your counsel, I don't have to speak, which is the Miranda warning. You have a right to remain silent type of thing. You can't use that against them. The fact that you've been silent about this and not talked to us, you can't use that against him. So that's what they're screaming about. And the judge is like, no, he can do it. I mean, some of the prosecution basically is, I'm trying to remember the way they exactly said it, which is he's opening the door to that by claiming why he didn't do it. I don't know. It was a little bit odd, but I think there's a definite claim there that you can have. And then there was an issue with attorney-client privilege, and the judge just letting this all in. So
the judge.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the judge, for better or worse, seems to kind of be like the refs in the Super Bowl for the first 3.5 quarters, where they're like, we're not going to call any penalties.
Yeah.
We aren't going to put our fingers on this scale of how this trial goes. We are literally going to let everything come in. We're going to let every egregious act by the state transpire in front of the jury, God, and everybody else. Because I'm not going to allow basically, attorney tomfoolery and slick games to stop this, this trial. Like I can understand as a layman on the legal side, the judge just saying, hey, gloves are off, everything's allowed. Don't even bother objecting. But I was more curious from a legal standpoint, of which I'm very ignorant, if there's still a benefit at this point that the defense should be, because I think another plausible reason why the counsel, the defense attorneys aren't objecting to anything is because they have full faith in the level of witness that is on the stand, that being Alex, a seasoned attorney that can handle himself to the degree that we already mentioned, that he's basically walking the dog with the state prosecutor. Like, the prosecution is now answering questions that are coming off of the witness stand. That, to me, that seems highly bizarre and not typical.
You're right, and the prosecutor ended today with a "You've hurt family members, right?" which is basically a yes or no answer. And he's like, "Yes, but," and they're like, "I don't want to hear anymore." And Alex looks at the judge and he's like, "But I want to explain." And the judge is like, "Okay, explain." And I'm like, first of all, the prosecutor, no, that's a yes or no question. Redirect can handle that. That's this, but here's exactly, they've let too much of this go. The judges allowed so much of this that even that he's like, well, now I can't say no. I mean, you guys are having a conversation up here. We're just listening in. And so he explains it. And you have some point there. The bigger issue is some of the objections are, one, to save for the record, but two, what is it projecting to the jury? So you see a lot of times they're using whatever the rules of evidence is for hearsay, like 403 or I don't know what it is there in South Carolina, rather than hearsay, because that may kind of explain to the jury that, oh, there's someone said something that we don't want you to hear. So they just use the evidence code number. Judge understands it and objects, or rules on that, what have you. So those are little things that you have to wonder about as far as the objections. I'll say this: you go back to Darrell Brooks, which was the guy that ran everybody over. He was obviously guilty. I don't know if you saw that trial. The judge
grounds,
yeah. The judge went out of her way to accommodate him, because one of the things you're talking about there is the gloves off. You still can't prejudice the person. They have to have a fair chance. Okay, so as an example, keep saying, okay, this person's 5'2" to 5'6". The prosecutor keeps referring to it as a 12-year-old. My God, that would never go over in the courts I practice. That is just, it's so abominable, and they kind of object, but they don't really force that. I would be, every time he says that, I would object to it. Now, do you not object because you see that the jury sees that it's ridiculous? I would still object to it to emphasize that it's ridiculous to the jury. And that would just be my thing. So
totally agree. And in fact, you just answered the only question I would have is, do you think that the jury's reaction to a certain degree is kind of leading the defense as far as how much they still want to hold this up? Because a big part of it is, since Alex took the stand a day ago, there's been open weeping of the audience and court, which I've heard from, I think it's Jake from court and the DUI guy, some internet personalities that kind of do like, I'll give you analysis of what the jury looks like they might be doing and what's going on in the gallery. And the consistent statement that's come back from both of them throughout the entire trial is that most everybody is still to this point saying that Alex is guilty. When you have open crying happening in the gallery from people that have been claiming the entire time and even whispering liar, Alex is a liar, and they're openly crying, Alex is winning them over. And I can't imagine that what's happening in the gallery is that different than what's happening in the jury box. And maybe that might be something that is leading the defense to say, like, I think we're fucking winning, so maybe we don't have to do anything.
His emotions were important. Him pushing back on all this financial stuff. I mean, the prosecutor makes the great point of, well, you're a liar all the time. I mean, who knows what you're saying now is true. But they have to get over this data that doesn't match up, which we talked about. They also have to get over the fact that his emotions were not fake. And his one comment he made today, which is what they did to Papa, as he calls him, Paul, shooting his face out like that. That's an angry person. That's someone who hates him a lot. There's no way you got any indication. There's no evidence that shows that Alex hated anybody like that, let alone his own kid.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And And the only time you see that is, I think, in 3 scenarios. And maybe help me fill in the blanks on if that's too many or if there should be more. I think you see that in crime of passion.
Yeah.
Where emotions have spiked to an unreasonable level, a murderous level. You see that in like trying to make a statement, like, I'm trying to send a message, which is what I think happened, and we'll get to that. Or you see that in, well, maybe there's only 2. Maybe it's literally crime of passion and sending a message. I don't see a
as he said,
scenario.
hatred. I just hate that person so much, but that might be the passion. It's not technically what a crime of passion, technically what you look at for like, okay, that's a scenario from a murder, right? Which is manslaughter or first degree. It's typically a crime of passion. It's got to be, heat of the moment, no cooling off period. These are the kind of things you're looking at, jilted lover type of stuff. But we haven't seen any of that.
Yeah, but 2 headshots,
right?
Those are execution shots.
Yeah.
That is intended to ensure that they are no longer living. There's been nothing that the state or even podcasts have been able to bring to the table to lead anybody, including the jury, to believe that Alex felt in any way that that's how that his family members needed to be deleted. Like, there's no argument that could have, even his opioid addiction. I've never heard of a case where somebody loves pills so much that they want to, basically behead their family members using firearms like that.
Have you heard of bath salts?
Well, see, the bad news is they're in South Carolina, not Florida. So, I don't know how that goes. But anyway, I don't want to hold us up, and I don't know how long you want to go. I'm down for going as long as
we're almost done here. But I thought I would just play. There was I didn't even know what this is, but it was YouTube here. It's just a few minutes of him kind of taking the stand. So I thought some highlights from ABC. So maybe we'll just play that. There we go.
On the kennel video at 8:44 p.m. on June 7th, the night Maggie and Paul were murdered.
It is.
Were you in fact at the kennels at 8:44 p.m. on the night Maggie and Paul were murdered?
I was.
Did you lie to them by telling them that you were not down at the kennels on that night?
Yes.
Murdaugh blaming those lies on his paranoia fueled by an opioid addiction and his distrust of state investigators.
I wasn't thinking clearly. I don't think I was capable of reason. And I lied about being down there. And I'm so sorry that I did.
Apologizing to his family, repeatedly
some weight.
referring to his wife and son by their nicknames.
Most of all, I'm sorry to Mags and Pawpaw. I would never intentionally do anything to hurt either one of them.
But he said he kept lying.
But once I lied, I continued to lie. Yes, sir.
Why?
Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
After Paul shot that video at 8:44, Murdaugh claims he went up to the house, dozed on the couch, then left to visit his mom, all during a roughly 20-minute window prosecutors believe he used to kill his wife and son, clean up, and leave the property. He claims he found the bodies when he got home, breaking down as he recalled that moment.
I was on the phone with 911, and I was trying to tend to Pawpaw. I was trying to tend to Maggie.
His surviving son Buster putting his head in his hands, his brother wiping away tears. And on those financial crimes, another admission from Murdaugh.
I can say I did wrong. I stole money that wasn't mine, and I shouldn't have done it.
And prosecutors asking Murdaugh why, in all the interviews with police, he never used those terms of endearment for his wife and son.
And this jury, of course, has heard multiple recorded statements of you during the course of this. Did you ever refer to Paul as Pawpaw during that?
I don't know.
Murdaugh's every word now under the microscope. His decision to take the stand, a high-risk move.
This is awfully risky for him to do. Any teardrop will be scrutinized. Any look that he gives.
Okay, I can't handle anymore.
Yeah, no, I'll go ahead and say this. Him taking the stand is not risky because if anybody's looking at the grand scheme, like if you are Alex, you're looking at over 99 financial crimes that you've already admitted to under oath. Now, whether or not that is going to be admissible in the other cases doesn't matter. We're talking about what's happening in this case. Like, he doesn't really have a very clear. There is a possibility, and I want to go through this, but he doesn't really have a clear pathway to ever seeing the light of day outside of a jail cell. So, what difference does it make if he's found guilty here? I think that he has nothing to lose. I don't think it's risky at all for Alex to take the stand. I think it's literally the best play the defense can have is to have an attorney, a seasoned attorney that is fully capable of navigating inquisitive questions, which we have not gotten because the prosecution is incapable of stating inquisitive questions. They're basically just making statements and then getting fucking dog walked by the witness.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that Alex has to lose by taking the stand. He has only everything to gain, in my opinion. But that's also because I came into the trial thinking he was guilty. The evidence has led me to believe that he's not guilty. I'm not going to say innocent, but not guilty. I've been watching the trial through the lens of defense attorneys, not from the true crime crowd. So all of that has kind of navigated me to have the perception that I've laid out on this on your episode tonight, which is why I don't think that there was anything to lose by having Alex take the stand at all.
Yeah. So look, even in I don't do criminal stuff anymore. Haven't for years. But
me neither. I left that life behind.
Yeah. I don't know. Said you had to get some of those lawyers in college. I guess you left behind. But clients are always asking me, then even just like would call a short cause hearing, going, do I have to talk? And I'm like, I'm always assessing these people because it's at that point, just like this, it's kind of up to me whether they're going to speak or not. And some clients, you definitely don't want to talk. One, maybe you don't believe them, or two, they just get too worked up and they're not going to be able to help themselves. I've had clients ruin their cases by thinking that they're going to talk and they want to, or just the emotions take over. So you have to assess that. Sometimes you have a client that you just like, I know you're innocent. I can't wait for you to say your part. And that's when you're not objecting because you just kind of want both sides. You want them to, narrate as much as possible and get it out there. So they had a good client to do this because he's, not a dummy. He knows. And I think they believe him. I think that there's nothing in the data that we've talked about those phones to match up where he's got to explain himself away. Then the only other thing is, do you have a criminal liability from this going elsewhere or civil liability with the financial stuff? He gave up. And I think that was the best thing for him. It's like, he's not going to fight those two. He's just going to say, fuck it. You know what? I don't want to go down on my conscience or on everyone else's that I killed these people. I would never have done that. And this is my interpretation if he is innocent.
Sure.
And so therefore I'm going to risk it all and do it. It's not always the wise thing to do, especially if you have a person that can't explain some things. So I had blood on me. I threw my, OJ Simpson, we would have loved to have heard him.
Yeah. Well, like one thing you said, are they going to be combative? Do they have the IQ to even take the stand and be able to handle themselves? None of those were considerations or concerns. I don't think there might've been considerations, but not concerns with Alex. I think another thing is, and one thing that I heard, because I'm not smart enough to think of this because I'm not a trial attorney, is the risk you run at times when you allow your client to become a witness is to think that he's smarter than the prosecution.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes come across as arrogant and, kind of just come across as like, I'm bigger than this case. I don't really need to do this because I'm so smart. And that didn't happen with Alex. Like one thing you said was his emotions, not only did they garner sympathy, but they were legitimate. I don't think they were fake.
No.
One thing, for example, I have an older sister who is a true crime fan, and occasionally we will talk about, certain cases or whatever that we're both interested in at the same time. She just started watching the trial yesterday because Alex was taking the stand. And I'm not putting her on the spot. I'm not blowing her up. In fact, I hope she's in your chat right now because I sent her the link. But
she just called you a base Chad liar. Oh no, that was someone else talking about Alex.
But she texted me and she was like, she thought he was guilty. Like, she lives in Savannah. The Savannah News has been covering this trial before the boat wreck. Like, so she's been inundated all day, every day with this shit for years. And I texted her when this trial was about to happen to say, "Hey, are you going to watch this?" And she was like, "Jesus Christ, Jim, I'm full up to my tits with Alex Murdaugh shit. Like, I've been watching this every day. I no, my mind is already made up. He's guilty. I hope they find justice for the Beach family." And but even yesterday, she texted me and she was like, "Holy shit, this motherfucker has me crying at my desk." She was watching at work, and I was like, "That is why you let a guy like Alex take the stand."
I often say, like, depositions or clients taking, trials and stuff. You're a piano, okay? So when the other side is asking you questions, I don't want to hear a song. If they're asking for one note, you push that note, and that's your answer. Da-da-da. Now, you're talking about people being too smart. I see this as well, where they're going to make little comments. They're going to try to jib and jab, or they're being so precise with the language that it makes them look evasive. He did not seem evasive. There were times where, and by the way, if you just said, "I'm not a smart trial attorney," I'm like, did you hear this DA at all? I mean, talk about and then before, back when, you've got to be specific in some things. I mean, it's just so bad. And so the times he may have seemed evasive, at least to me, was him not really understanding, because was it a question? Was it a statement? Are you yelling at me? I don't know what's going on here. So for the most part, I did not feel him being evasive. He was trying to be specific. Were you a successful attorney? Okay, well, that's so vague. That's very subjective. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, and not only that, to echo that, so the clip that we played earlier that I sent you is with the lead investigator saying, yeah, sure, trickery is a tool we get to use to elicit a response, blah, blah, blah. It was followed up after we stopped playing that portion of the video where they asked about, what, in a lot of instances where witnesses or defendants, in this case, are trying to recall events, what is the most common thing that they get wrong? And he goes, timing. The time in which people are where they think and say they are, and versus reality. And when Alex was getting grilled about, like, you lied about your time here and your time there and whatever, I don't think that holds nearly the weight that the state thinks it does, versus his ability to reach a level of emotion that I think all of us are able to kind of pinpoint and say, that's real. You can fake cry, if you're good enough and if you've practiced enough, but you can't fake snot coming out your nose. There was a time where it was fucking disgusting. He literally was like slobbering and drooling out of his mouth. I don't know how you fake that. Maybe he's just that damn good, though. Like, but either he's that damn good, but at the same time he fumbled his attempted suicide, which we haven't even mentioned yet. That I don't know how you can be the best actor and smartest double murderer of all time while simultaneously not being able to execute your own self-deletion. Like, how does that play?
Well, let's talk about that. We'll kind of stop there and probably come back, because this trial, I think the probably Monday they're going to rest. Maybe there's some counter stuff, and we could always come back and revisit this, Magoo.
I'm down.
Yeah. Okay. Because you've been really good, by the way, on this. He did try to kill himself after the fact, and you want, and he's, by the way, when you talk about people not being able to, the time they get wrongs, and he's claimed today, and when he was testifying, that so many times he would say, yes, but check my phones, because he's like, check this, because he knew that there was data out there, and I just can't get over that I believe that's, to me, it's kind of like, it's either, you're right, either he was working with someone, or he didn't do it, because it just doesn't tie up to those things. In addition, the emotion seems real, and I think if he was a psychopath, you would have seen evidence of him, besides just stealing money for drugs, of him being a horrible person to his wife, a horrible person to his kids. Friends, neighbors would have known about this, because he's a fucking psychopath that can now cry on demand when he just executed him. I just don't think those things all work together. But maybe then he was just high on drugs.
No. And hopefully Exactly. Hopefully, if you allow it before this episode ends, we can get to what we think actually happened.
Okay,
But
we're gonna have to be quick. I'm gonna go to eat with my wife here in a little bit. So yeah, go ahead.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get into it. I think that if you just look
Talk
at
about the roadside missed execution, because that blows me away.
Yeah, so some people look at that and go, "Oh, well, he's clearly guilty because who would go through these lengths to not face trial?" Is how they look at it. And I see it as, well, it's pretty evident. You have 10 to 12 million dollars that would go to his final remaining son, Buster, if he's not around anymore.
Yeah.
And so it yet furthers the dialogue of, I would rather self-sacrifice for the betterment of my family, which is why I think he did all the embezzlement. Is like, look, even if this comes back on me, that comes back on me, but it's I'm only doing this so that my family can reap the benefit of these fruits that I'm stealing. So, and you can probably speak more to this legally, but you don't get any life insurance money if you delete yourself.
Right.
And so him just trying, to end his life because the weight of everything is so great and he's so guilty. A guilty man doesn't give a shit if there's anything left behind. So this whole thing came about. We've already stated that he was an opioid addict. The guy that he got his drugs from that can be traced because he wrote checks to his drug dealer. Who the fuck does that if you're a genius? The guy was a moron that literally was just the fourth generation of a very long lineage of very privileged living that he didn't think he had to really work that hard to hide anything, in my opinion, which is why he fumbled through every aspect that can be proven that he tried to manipulate. He hires his drug dealer to use Alex's own revolver to kill him, and he fucks that up so bad that he has run flat tires, yet he stabs the sidewall of his tire on a back road, middle of nowhere road. And it's alleged, or not alleged, it's basically fessed up to at this point, that his drug dealer was to drive by, see that he was in distress, stop and pop him in the head, delete him, and then all of Alex's problems would be over at that point, outside of whatever God wants to do with him. And then the insurance money, he would immediately make Buster a millionaire so that he could then go and have a fruitful life. Like, final sacrifice, putting my son in a place that he could enjoy life for the remainder of his existence. And none of that happens. None of that goes down. Alec gets out, stabs the sidewall. Well, yeah, so he gets out and he stabs the sidewall of his run flat. Idiot. First of all, idiot. That's an obvious slashing, not anything you're going to pick up on the road. And then he takes the knife, folds it up, and limp-wristedly throws it across the street where officers find it immediately. He gets shot in the head, but it's a flesh wound, like you said. It's enough to where, like, he loses sight for a minute, he regains sight, realizes he's not dead, and is like, fuck, well, I guess I got to call 911. He calls 911, gets airlifted to a hospital in Savannah. And then that's how the whole Uncle Eddie character, who is his drug dealer, gets brought into this story. And that is still yet to come into this trial, as far as Cousin Eddie being put on the stand, which I'm very surprised. They spent a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, on financial crimes, but they have yet to say, hey, drug dealer to Alex, get on the stand, which to me, I think is just negligent.
Well, it could be the fact that they're like, okay, if you had anything to do with these murders, you would have been able to kill him. I don't know how you can't kill him. Probably because you're not a murderer. You're like, I don't really want to do.
Yeah, maybe because you're just really bad at murdering people, including yourself, or setting it up. Or
so, what do you think happened then? I mean, there's all kinds of. He said today, because the prosecutor's like, oh, you think you said at the time it's something to do with the boat murder. So one of those families did it. And he's like, absolutely not. I think it's the fact that we had such vile social media threats against Papa at the time and basically he had a nice way of turning it around and saying, it's not me that's liable for these murders. It's you and SLED, because it was leaks that came out of the DA for the criminal stuff. It's SLED doing this. And he didn't say it in that way, but you're like, oh shit, he's literally blaming the cops and everybody for all the crap they said about that. So I think that was an interesting prospect.
No, and I think it was great that he got that out on record, because it's like, kind of just demolishes the entire state's case against him in a different way. But I think what happened, and this is what I've thought for a little while, is you don't have somebody that has $50,000 a week going to drug cartels, gangs, whatever you want to call it, and you're still alive. If it's just payment for drugs, you're dead, because or you have a stockpile of drugs that literally you need a 1,700 acre piece of property to store all those pills. I don't think that he was ingesting nor purchasing $50,000 a week worth of drugs. I think that the embezzlement of money from his law firm mixed in with $50,000 going out to drug cartels was money laundering for very unscrupulous characters. And I think that because he was also using that, put him in a vulnerable place where he could get out over his skis pretty quickly and get himself in financial trouble with some unsavory characters. I think you couple that with the boat case, that it was about to go to trial. He was about to get launched into public notoriety for criminal acts. No, even if Alec wasn't driving the boat or had anything to do with the boat, it was going to draw attention. It was going to put a spotlight on something that has been a cash cow for drug gangs for years. And I think that there was probably and likely some disagreements, some, hey, we don't want to be associated with a character that's going to get this much attention if we take Paul out, not knowing who the case was actually against. It was against Alec. But if we take Paul out, that might save it. It might dodge this whole bullet of the boat trial, bringing undue attention our way so that we can keep operating with our cash cow. Don't kill Alec, but just kill the kid who is a
liability.
He's a liability at least. And Maggie happened to be there, so she had to get it too. But it was at least 2 killers. I think it was a hit squad. I think, and anybody that's going to go out to kill somebody like that, especially that's any part of organized crime, they're not going to show up with cell phones. They're not going to be tracked on, GPS data. They're going to have everything in place where there's not going to be any OnStar data. There's not going to be any, camera footage. Like, they know what they're doing, and they popped Paul with a shotgun because they wanted to prove a point. They had somebody else there. Maggie came around the corner, saw what happened. The way she was shot, it is clear as day to me that she was shot running away, and then she bent over when they hit her in the gut, and the trajectory of the bullet that went through her left breast and up through her head means she was bent over and she was shot from behind, which would have been from the same position where the shooter that shot Paul was. And then they finished it off by coming around the top and blasting her in the head.
Which doesn't correlate with her, because if her husband's out there doing this, she's probably not going to run away from him. She's going to confront, what did you just do? And a stranger shooting her son, she's going to run away.
And it's also possible that they were eyeing the property, saw that Alec was there, and was like, let's go, hold them captive and make our fucking point. But they show up. Alec is back at the house. They didn't want to do anything. Paul's a little bit of a hothead, fights back with them in the feed room. That's why the shot was so close, was because Paul was fighting for the gun. He gets blasted in the chest. He fucking spins around and tries to stumble out, and he gets caught in the head. Maggie sees that, freaks the fuck out, turns to run. She also had an abrasion on her lower calf of an ATV tire. If you look at the crime scene photos and badge cam, there's a side-by-side right there outside the door underneath the overhang next to the shed. She easily could have backed into that, rolled off of it, and tried to run away. She was shot 4 times immediately following, falls to her death spot, and she was already dead, but got the cap in the head to ensure that it was done. And then they fucking grab her phone, because she probably had her phone in her hand, and they ran away because they were parked down the road. They realized, fuck, this is evidence, tossed it, and then fucking vanished. And Alec, being just the guy in the wrong place at the wrong time, gets this case pinned on him, even though every bit of evidence that the state has tried to bring in has been nothing but exculpatory, in my opinion. There's a legal word.
Yeah, it is. I don't know what happened. I feel like and I could see why the Snapchat video, him being down there at the time, that does start to make your timelines not quite right. Another thing that they talked about was, he said he's in the house. He has, once again, that engineer did a whole acoustics breakdown, and said it's not possible. My favorite part of that one, though, was he was also talking about the tree, and the guy's like, do you know trees grow? Because maybe your angles are wrong now that those trees have grown. And, I wish the engineer just knew the growth rate of a tree, on a yearly basis, because he could have just spit that out, because it's so ridiculous that this over a year or so later that it's going to grow to the point with.
He did it in January of this year, I believe. And
Yeah.
so you're looking at a 1.5 year rate of growth on a southern white pine tree. I could probably fucking Google that and get that for you. But
it's not going to be enough to throw off your numbers.
Well, and if you're only looking at angles, and not to get super fucking retard gay about this, but if you saw the holes in the size of the window, anywhere in that window, the tree rate of growth is not going to be so great that you're not going to, that like your angle comes down, hits the hole, and then it still holds.
Well, especially at that distance, right? The angle could just be a little bit, and it can move up and down on the tree. So you're very much within that range.
Well, and the only trees that are having quick rates of growth, and I'm going to nerd out here for a minute, is the ones that they planted to fill in the airstrip. The ones behind the shed were established, mature pine trees. They're not growing in any rate that is going to affect that angle. And that I could testify that as a horticultural background guy. Not to fully dox what I do, but you can guess.
Now I do. Speaking of growing, we need to grow this channel a little bit, so people just like it, subscribe, send it to your friends, send this episode out, because I think it's fantastic. This was a great breakdown. We will come back to this some more. Predictions on guilty, not guilty. It's so tough because we don't know the makeup of the jury, or maybe you do, but I don't know the people and what they're going to be thinking. But I think I'm with you. I started out saying, I thought he was just guilty, and then I'm watching it, and I started to think to myself, maybe he did it, but they can't. What they're presenting as evidence doesn't swing to this burden that they're supposed to be doing. And now I've come to the point where I just like, I don't think he could have done that.
I'm 1,000,000% there. The fact that you have the worst guy in the county, in the state's history, that is such a bad guy that you can't fully slam with evidence. Makes me just question if you have a case at all. And I think that if he's found guilty, it will be strictly because of the town's whispers, more so than any evidence. But if they have and I didn't get to see voir dire, so I don't know the makeup of the jury, what their background is, and what their interest level in this case is, or knowledge. So I have no idea what the verdict is going to be. If it was me on that trial, it would have been not guilty from like day 2. Once I realized that the state was incapable of making a coherent case showing clear motive. If anything, the state has only proven, while not being able to show a clear motive for Alec to do it, they have opened the view to half the town being viable candidates for wanting the murder family to face a grand demise.
Yeah,
and so they've only hurt themselves in that aspect.
Absolutely. You know, we do these things. It's called ex parte, which is you're just one person to the judge. Domestic violence restraining orders are those you file it into the court on pleadings. The judge doesn't even know the other side doesn't even know this is happening. He makes a ruling. So sometimes you go in, one side has made a presentation, and guilty or whatever, and then the other side defense, and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm switched. I was more convinced he wasn't guilty with just the one side presenting evidence. And I was just like, I don't know. The prosecution just was so bad with their evidence. Or you could just tell it was reaching. I guess that's what it is. So any last words on this?
Yes. And once again, thank you for allowing me the time to come on and discuss this. I won't say he's innocent because I don't.
Interesting.
Well, first of all, it doesn't matter. Because he's not on trial to be found innocent. He's on trial to be found guilty or not guilty. And I think that based on the evidence, there's no way that I would ever think anything other than the final outcome, a just outcome being in this scenario on this trial, that he should be found not guilty. I don't know if he's innocent. I do think that his actions that have come out in the trial that he's admitted to has probably led to a certain degree the level of outcome that his family faced, even the murders. So I don't know if innocent is ever a vocabulary that will ever be in my vocabulary, regarding Alec. I just don't think that he killed his family.
Yeah, it does make me feel bad that he lost his son and wife, but man, he's a bad guy. It goes back to the thing, even a prostitute can claim she was raped and be legit on that. So,
but what was she wearing?
Well, that's exactly the prosecution's defense in this case. Our defense, they're putting forward. Yeah, but look what he was wearing. So that's exactly it. Okay. Thanks, Magoo. Appreciate it. Everyone go check him out on Twitter. He has a podcast, Ignore the Rant. It's pretty good. It's not politics. It's all different kinds of stuff. So anything else you're doing that you should know about?
It's I appreciate it. No, my podcast, Ignore the Rant, I do it with two of my best friends. We put them out whenever the fuck we feel like it. We haven't put out an episode in a month. We will be doing that this weekend.
Good.
I don't know if any of this trial is going to come in because my two co-hosts don't pay attention to the shit that I find interesting. So we make it up on the fly, and it's nothing but chicanery and tomfoolery. And if you're down for that, come check us out. Tyler, as always, thank you, brother. Appreciate you having me on. I'll be more than happy to come on to discuss this and any more autistic matters at your whimsy.
Yes, you've been on our Kill Pod. We'd love it. I will have you back for this. So let's keep in touch on this. Until then, everyone stay safe. Have a good weekend, and I don't know. Let's hope for some excitement in the final. All right, thanks.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. And I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast. I can't find it anywhere. And they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke. Yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger. I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.